As it is right now, even a fool should know by now that the revolution is sweeping the continent of Africa, led by young Africans who have had enough of the oppressive regimes imposed on their people by foreign governments and the capitalistic systems of this world that only see Africa as their farmlands and warehouse for natural resources. It is a movement of a generation of Africans who have had enough of the mindlessness and greed of their own leaders who only see positions of power as another avenue to steal money and to enrich their families and friends. It should not take rocket science to make Africa work for Africans, if those in the aim of affairs are actually there for the good of the people. And I love the way more voices are beginning to rise in Africa, voices who are not afraid to speak to powers and to correct the foolishness in the hearts of those who are supposed to be bearers of wisdom and true leadership. One of such voices is the man named Sam George, a member of the Ghanaian parliament, who is not afraid to call out the president of that country for corruption and the mismanagement of funds in his administration.
We need to come out as a country and tell ourselves the truth. President Akufo-Addo and his crony of thieves in government have intentionally sat down and run this. And look, when I call them thieves, I mean thieves, literal thieves.
Aren't you being a bit too hard?
No, listen, Chief. Are you aware that this government, and look, President Akufo-Addo and his ministers, Atachia, Asensu Boachi, will face prosecution. The Mahama administration, I would lead that charge. If they don't prosecute the people in charge of the Works and Housing Ministry when we come to office, I will take the government of John Mahama to task from 2025. Because this project is in my constituency. Over $7 million of building material, listen, $7 million has been stolen by this government, under the watch of this government. They abandoned the site, put national security and police officers on the site that they were protecting the site, and $7 million worth of building material that was left in there to complete, tiles, cables, pipes, $7 million stolen. Look, my boys kept complaining and telling me that, Honorable, the police guys that government has put here are stealing. And I said it's not true. One of the days...
Wait, you are saying the police themselves stole those things?
The so-called police and national security who were put there. I'm telling you the story. 1 a.m., my guys called me and said, Honorable, we've been telling you said we're lying, so now we've caught them. I drove to the site. At 1 a.m., so-called police officers with a Kia Bongo truck had loaded tiles, sanitary wares, toilet bowls and all from the site. We took them to the Chopoli police station. From there, we marched them on to the Tema Regional Command. That case has died because the guys made it clear to me, Honorable, we were sent by our commanders to come and take the things.
Which commanders?
When they said they were sent by their commanders, but these were people who were put there by national security. I'm saying, Dr. Blaze...
No, yes. but it behoves you then. I mean, where you find yourself, you have that clout, that opportunity.
We have asked questions.
You shouldn't let this... If this is what it is,
and that's what I'm saying to you, that the
lie.
Akufo-Addo government is a bunch of crooks and thieves who have intentionally left Saglimi to rot so that they can sell it to themselves for a pittance. Now they are facing the challenge. Look, I'm reading to you a story. If you say Sam George is not... is playing politics. 1st of May 2021, Ghana Web, Saglemi Housing, equipment worth $7 million stolen at project site, former consultant. And that is being said not by me, by Dr. Kaminta Baizi, who was the consultant for the project. $7 million. There are several other stories. Look, we got policemen stealing from the Saglemi Housing project. All reported by the media. Because I addressed the media when we did this. This was not the state of Saglimi. They have intentionally and willfully caused financial loss to the state. And look, this whole talk about we are going to give it to a private contractor, it is just another create, loot, and keep. This is not create, loot, and share. Create, loot, and keep by the kleptocrats, the thieves in the Akufo-Addo government.
In Africa, we love to sing the song of democracy and are very quick to raise storms and dust when a military coup happens in any of the nations in Africa. But we really don't pay attention to what the meaning of democracy really is. Even though democracy in itself is a lie, for those who forced it on Africans are not really democratic, but at least the definition is that it is of the people, for the people, and by the people. But the question now is this: why is no one listening to the cry and the pain of the people until a military coup happens and then we all start to raise dust and make a lot of noise? So, a barely legitimate and quite frankly undemocratic government of Nigeria wants to lead ECOWAS to do the bidding of their masters in Niger Republic, citing an undemocratic removal of a president through a military coup. Talk about hypocrisy. How come they didn't begin this intervention by first asking France to shut down its military base in Niger? How come they didn't begin this intervention by asking France to shut down its uranium mining, whose radioactive contamination is killing Nigerians? How is it that they are not asking the US military drone base in Niger to be shut down and then give room for African brothers to iron out their issues among themselves? How come interventions in Africa are never about how to make the lives of Africans better? Instead, it's always been about debt, aid, and foreign military interferences, which are mostly about protecting the interests of foreign powers in the continent. So we can talk about the military coup in Niger all we want and about all the other military coups that has happened in Africa. But until we start to talk about the hidden coups going on daily in the lives of Africans, and which have placed Africa in this subservient, backward and poverty-stricken place, we will be lying to ourselves. The question I want to ask the ECOWAS leaders and the leaders of AU is this: what about France's colonial tax that is imposed on all its former colonies, which requires these countries to keep 50% of their foreign reserves in an operations account held at the French Treasury? And this has been for decades. Is this not an economic and financial coup against the people of the Francophone countries? What about the presence of foreign military bases in Africa? Are African nations not supposed to be sovereign nations with their own military? Are those military bases not coups or instruments of coups? Let's talk about our African women who are mistreated, sexually abused, and even killed in the United Arab Emirates by mindless employers who think that the name African means slavery. These are the many faces of coups in Africa that we are not dealing with. What about the Eurocentric educational curriculum that has been the foundation of our modern education in Africa? Is that not a coup against the minds of our young people who think that the chicken and chips of Europe and America is the definition of modernity? How is it even possible that nowhere in Africa has an educational system that is focused on the African cultural heritage and by which our kids are taught based on what works in Africa? Why are we not talking about this coup? What about the millions of NGOs that come into Africa in the name of charity, but have become agents of data mining and the manipulation of narratives in our rural areas? Are these not systemic and cultural coups against Africans that the AU should be talking about? How is it possible that even in the midst of a war, Ukraine could still export grain to Africa, while Africa, which has 60% of the world's arable land, cannot feed herself? Is there a coup greater than this? Why do we talk about coups only in the context of when an unwanted African leader is removed through military force, just so that we can protect the interests of those who kept him or her in power? Why are we not talking about the coups of human trafficking going on in Africa and the death of Africans who are trying to cross the Mediterranean in search of greener pastures? Are these not coups against our collective lives as Africans? I love the way Dr. Arikana Chiumbore puts it. Take a look.
Do you think that ECOWAS putting military intervention on the table, announcing a standby force, has put a good option on the table?
I don't think it's a good option. And I would want to ask the same people who are sitting at the table having those discussions about having a military intervention in Niger. Let me remind you that there are other coups that we are not talking about, that we should be talking about. By France forcing Niger to send all its natural resources to France, that's a coup. By France having its own military in Niger and forcing Nigerians that you can only be trained by France, that is a coup. by forcing Niger to deposit 50% of its reserves with France, that is a coup. The question I have for those who are sitting on the table, during those ECOWAS meetings, during those AU peace and security meetings, what have you done about those coups? Take those 3 coups, multiply by 14, because that's what's happening in the 14 former French colonies. Those are deadly coups that have been taking place for decades. And you, ECOWAS, have done nothing about those coups. I need them to also answer and give us remedy as to how they are going to handle those coups. Make no mistake about it. Those are coups against the African citizens in those countries. And while they discuss what they would like to do with Niger, I would also want them to table those coups and come up with a solution as to what needs to be done. Because behind those coups that I just described from France, there are millions of children who are dying from starvation. There are millions of children who are going to bed with an empty stomach. There are millions of African youth who are unemployed. There are millions of women who are dying while giving birth to another life. I need them to put that on the table as well. If their interests are truly about the Africans, let's look at the global view of the issue. Let's have a bird's eye view of the issue and have a frank and fair and honest discussion about what is really going on in Africa. I do know that I don't think the carnage that's going on in Africa is what ECOWAS is all about. Leadership is about the people. It's about creating a better life for the people. But if you're going to allow one who has committed egregious crimes in Africa continues to have coups, those are coups. Let's call a spade a spade. You can't give France a pass. So also let us know what you intend to do about those ongoing economic and political coups that are being imposed on those 14 French countries, former French colonies by France. So to just talk about what's happening in Niger alone, in isolation, and not go to the root causes of the genesis of why what's happening is happening, simply does not make any sense. And I would hope military intervention in Niger is not an option. That simply is not something we should do as Africans. There are better ways of dealing with our issues. Our elders must come together. Our elders must have a frank conversation, and let's look at what is ultimately best for the people, not only the people in Niger, but in all former French colonies and ultimately in all African countries, because this moment is calling for unity, meaningful unity of purpose among the African leaders to simply say, guys, this can no longer continue. It simply cannot continue. The people have spoken, and I hope our leadership would listen.
Imagine with me the foolishness of those ones who call themselves senators and reps in Nigeria. They allocated for themselves 70 billion naira to buy furniture and renovate their offices. And now they are asking for another 110 billion naira to buy bulletproof cars for themselves. And all these they are doing while Nigerians are dealing with the high cost of fuel, which is almost 750 naira per liter. $1 now is exchanged at almost 1,000 naira. Talk about the high cost of food, lack of constant electricity, and the many other woes that the people of Nigeria are going through. Imagine such a mindless and wicked disposition of those who are supposed to be the representative of the people. So should I be surprised if we wake up one morning to the news of a military coup in Nigeria? Not for one bit. Why? Ignoring the cries of the people for too long is how and why coups happen. Let us deal with the coups in Africa from all of its many faces, and not from the myopic place that we are trying to deal with it. A lot is going on right now in Africa, and the people are not happy. It breaks the heart to know that these things have been going on for decades. The manufactured poverty that the Africans are dealing with daily, the stealing of natural resources by government agencies and the multinationals, the corruption in the government, the lack of basic amenities even in the midst of plenty, and the list is endless. We need to do something about the pain of our people before the whole of Africa becomes a battlefield of coups. There has to be a way out of all of these chokeholds, so we need to do something about it. AU, ECOWAS, everyone, we all need to do something about the pain of the people of Africa. But before I leave you, Watch this video of President William Ruto of Kenya speaking about the unfair financial policies that Africa is subjected to by the global financial institutions. For me, this issue that he is talking about is another global coup against Africa, and we need to do something about it urgently. Please like, comment, and share this video. Thank you very much.
Three things are very important when you speak about finance. Number one is cost. Number two is scale. Number three is how long it takes to get it. At the moment, and I'm speaking as a policymaker, and I'm speaking as somebody who has interacted in this space, it takes eternity, if I may say. It takes eternity to get to any financial close on many aspects when you're looking for financing, number one. Number two, sometimes you don't get the scale of the money you're looking for. And number three, there is something called risk, which is a new definition of how not to lend money. Because this risk, and you know, and we pay an arm and a leg for risk. Although data speaks a different language, data shows that investments in our region are not as risky as they are being profiled. So in fact, this profiling of our region as a risky destination is a conspiracy by people. And I saw some of them about a week ago, 2 weeks ago. They were trying to profile us, the credit rating agencies. I think they are the new tools of colonialism, if I may say. Because data speak a different language from the risk we are being profiled. And as a result, we are all now in this space, and it's almost a consensus that the people, the rest of us in this region, we pay anywhere between 4 and 8 times more for resources, for development, for investment, put in place infrastructure than others, than our brothers and sisters in the global north. And we have no problem with our brothers and sisters in the global north accessing finances lower than us. The question we are asking ourselves is that why are we not getting the same treatment? Why are we being profiled negatively when facts and data show something different? So this is the conversation we want to have. And it is a foregone conclusion today that the system we have is not working. There is need for reform of the international financial system to do 3 things. Reform to speak to time. How long does it take? It takes minimum 18, 24 months. You know, some of the interventions don't have that kind of gestation period. It doesn't have that time, number one. Number two, scale. I'm speaking, for example, and I'm asking myself, if we were to ask for $3 billion to build the standard gauge railway, which China was gracious to give to us, and it took a fairly short time, below 12 months, we wouldn't have built the SGR if we were looking for finances in the current financial system. We wouldn't get that scale. And number 3, we wouldn't get the kind of interest that we are looking for. So our position is that there is something the current international financial institutions can learn from China, for example, scale and speed. Maybe there is something China can also learn from our current international institution. But we are saying there needs to be a conversation. We need a conversation that makes all of us winners. And what we are saying is, in the reform of these institutions, we're not being reckless. What we are saying is, let us have a fairer international financial system that doesn't price the rest of us into debt, into default, into a situation where it becomes impossible. I mean, let me just ask us seated here. If one person is paying 8 times more than the other, isn't that person paying 8 times set up to fail from the beginning? In fact, it would be a miracle if you don't default. In fact, I think some people are asking themselves, why have these people not defaulted? And it is the same reason, for example, why those Moody's people, the credit rating agencies, were really pushing that, Kenya is in very serious situation. Until we told them, if you continue profiling us negatively, we will pay off this debt and see what you're going to do. Because they were making it look like we are unable to pay. We're telling them we want to pay. In fact, we want to pay before it's due. And they wanted to tell us, if you pay before it's due, it amounts to a default. What kind of nonsense is that? I mean, if you pay your debt early, how does it become a default? It's madness, isn't it? But, we are not conforming to what their expectations. So they are wondering, you are paying 8% more. Why are you not defaulting? Why do you want to pay early? This is the unfortunate conversation we want to have.